Thank you. Andrew, thanks for having us. Good morning, everybody. Is this on? Got no juice. Are you hearing audio? You are? You guys good? Okay. Listen, this is a little bit calling on audible at the line of scrimmage. So before we get on with the reason why we're here, before I begin with that, or we begin with that, I want to briefly address the reports that the U.S. Supreme Court has voted to overturn the longstanding precedents of both Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey and eliminate the federal protection of a woman's reproductive freedom. Quite frankly, and I would say sadly, while enraging, this news is hardly surprising. This is exactly why we took the step that we did earlier this year in enshrining every New Jerseyans' full reproductive rights into state law. When I stood with lawmakers in October 2020 to introduce at that point the Reproductive Freedom Act, it was just 6 days after Donald Trump selected Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. It was as clear then as it is now that this court, stacked with Trump appointees, could not be trusted to protect women's reproductive rights. If the court indeed does take this awful step, this decision will have no impact on New Jersey state law or the full right to reproductive freedom under our state law. This remains fully intact because here in New Jersey, instead of hoping for the best, we prepared ourselves for the worst. Throughout our administration, I have fought for a single basic principle, that this must be a decision made between a woman and her doctor, period. If a right-wing Supreme Court cannot recognize this simple truth, our elected officials in Washington must take matters into their own hands. And I know Tom Malinowski will do just that. Congress must immediately pass federal legislation protecting the reproductive rights of all Americans everywhere across this nation. If that means reforming the filibuster, then we need to reform the filibuster. We must ensure that every American woman has the freedom that every New Jersey woman has. And if this Congress won't protect reproductive freedom, America needs to elect a Congress in November, including Tom Malinowski, that will. With that, Nick, come on down.
All right. Thank you, Governor. Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Saparulo, and my family used to live right here. My wife, Stephanie, asked that I speak on behalf of our family and hers, as the properties that once stood here and continue to stand on Curly Lane were built by her great-grandfather, some over 100 years ago. I grew up across the Delaware in Pennsylvania, but I'm proud to call New Jersey my home. Specifically, Lambertville had become my home. The family compound of houses here at Curly Lane was a safe and welcoming place to raise our children. My wife was raised here, as was her father. No worries. Hello, hello, hello. I think we're back up. Okay. My wife was raised here, as was her father. We were lucky to have Stephanie's parents across the driveway right here. My father-in-law knew our home down to the studs, and my mother-in-law was always available to help with our kids or to provide that missing ingredient. Our comfort in living next to Swan Creek was rooted in over a century of family history here at Curly Lane. That belief was shattered on the night of September 1st. As we watched wildfires in California, the idea of a natural disaster here seemed far away, though we had received weather alerts throughout the day about an approaching Hurricane Ida. Tornado warnings are not a typical part of our meteorological forecast, but this was the second one in the past month. Not having a basement, our family went across the driveway to my wife's parents in case of high winds. Luckily, the tornado that passed close by did not require we take shelter. What quickly became apparent, though, was the now torrential downpour that was unrelenting was causing a rapid rise in the creek. Water was coming down the hill to my left and feeding the typically dry side of the creek with more water than we'd ever seen. I ran back to our house to gather a bag with essentials so that we could move the family to higher ground in town. In less than 5 minutes, a flash flood pushed the creek over its banks and was rushing through where you sit today. Our home was pushed off its foundation less than 30 minutes later. We were all safe, but our house had to be demolished afterwards. We could no longer live on this property for numerous reasons, but mostly out of concern for our children. All that considered, we do see a light at the end of the tunnel. We are living in a new home and hopeful to be included in a buyout program as we do continue to pay a mortgage on this property. Without the assistance of such programs, families like mine would be burdened with a debt that would seriously hinder their timely return to normalcy. Those of us who have lived here, have lived next to water, and understand the appeal and privilege of being so close to nature's beauty. And yet, while we cannot control which natural disasters we must endure, there are ways to mitigate the devastation. State and local funding for preventative flood efforts can help to protect other families and properties located in flood-prone areas. With an increase in major storms and new weather phenomena in our region, a proactive approach is needed. While we are saddened by the loss, we appreciate the outpouring of support we received from friends, family, the community, and the governor's office. We welcomed his visit days after the flood when we did not know where help would come from, and we welcome him today with the knowledge that those who have lost everything in natural disasters have a path to be made whole once more. And with that, it's my pleasure to reintroduce Governor Phil Murphy. Thank you. My pleasure.
Bless you. Very good to be back. As you can see, the governor's office spares no expense, so we bring our own generator with us as we travel the state. Good morning again, everybody. Nick, thank you for leading things off for us. To you and Stephanie, I know this was supposed to be the place where your kids would grow up surrounded by family, but as you noted, Ida unfortunately had other plans. When I met you guys in those first days after the storm, you were still cleaning up, to say the least. And while I know it's no easier for you to stand here today, I want you to know that we're not only still with you, but today we're here to be more proactive in protecting families just like yours from the extreme event that you and your family survived. So again, thank you for letting us be here where your family has strong roots and where your home once stood. I'm honored to be here with a cavalcade of outstanding other individuals, beginning with Lambertville Mayor Andrew Nowick, sitting beside Nick. Mayor, I know your administration, along with members of the Council President Julia Taylor and colleagues, that you all are committed to making this proud and historic city more resilient and more proactive in its own right against future storms. Thank you for everything you and your colleagues do. We're joined by the aforementioned Congressman Tom Malinowski, who has been helping to deliver federal flood relief along with so many others in our congressional delegation. Nobody does it better than you, Tom. And he's also sitting beside another important guy who we're going to hear from, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, outstanding leader in his own right, Sean Tourette. We've just been joined. I was just at an event with them down in Ewing Township, so it's great to see Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds-Jackson, Assemblyman Anthony Varelli with us, Hunterdon County Commissioner Director, former Lambertville resident John Lenz is with us. John, great to have you with us. Former Mayor Julia Fall is with us. Julia, great to see you. And we're all here to begin a new way of looking at storm resilience in New Jersey. So for far too long, our mitigation efforts have been reactive. We've designed systems and programs in response to floods. We saw what waters did and worked to set up ways to prevent those waters from returning. But the reality is that we need to start looking forward to the storms that haven't yet happened. I think we've heard enough about how many 100-year storms we've had in the past 10 years to realize that we're not dealing with 100-year storms anymore. We're dealing with a new reality. Ida, I think, shouldn't be looked at as a fluke. It should be looked at as a precautionary tale. So today we're unveiling a comprehensive 4-part plan to make New Jersey not just more flood resilient, but more anticipatory of future storms. So first up today, I'm proud to announce a new $50 million investment of federal Ida recovery funds. And the leader of our office in that regard, Dan Kelly, is with us. Dan, great to have you with us. To put those monies into our nationally recognized Blue Acres program. Blue Acres works with homeowners who raise their hands, like Stephanie and Nick, by the way, and communities like Lambertville, to facilitate the market rate purchase of properties which have experienced repetitive flood losses, so these properties can be returned as open space that can allow some flood waters to be absorbed or diverted. We have to arrive at the realization that the cycle of flood, rebuild ad nauseum is not good for families or communities. With this $50 million investment, we will focus on the worst of the worst properties in Ida-impacted communities. We will work with homeowners to get them off this costly merry-go-round, a ride that in the long term no longer makes either economic or environmental sense. And we're not just going to use Blue Acres as we look back to past storms and past floods, but also to anticipate future storms and future floods. We know the areas which are most flood prone, and we know the homes which stand in those areas. So we will use the Blue Acres program as a preemptive tool to work with those homeowners and communities to buy out those properties and turn them into open space before they suffer another catastrophic loss. And by the way, there's a whole application process associated with this. Dan and his team will be posting that shortly, and folks like Nick and Steph who have raised their hands can get right into that process. This effort, by the way, will be alongside and in conjunction with State Police Superintendent Colonel Pat Callahan and the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management, who work constantly with our county and municipal partners to build resiliency through buyout programs, elevations, and other infrastructure projects using federal FEMA recovery dollars. We are also going to embark on a comprehensive program of improving and shoring up our flood resilience infrastructure, facilitating more than $1 billion in new federal investments statewide to study and design, but most importantly, build new hard flood prevention infrastructure projects in some of our most flood-prone watersheds. We will do this in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, along with Congressman Tom Malinowski and his colleagues and our federal partners. Alongside this investment, we're also making possible $10 million of new grant funds for communities to put to use to plan for better stormwater management and undertake green infrastructure projects. Families who live alongside waterways know, and you guys know for sure, how they can turn from idyllic, as you described, Nick, idyllic woodland creeks to raging and overflowing rivers in a matter of literally minutes. But families whose properties back onto parking lots or large stretches of blacktop or other impervious surfaces also know how a storm can send sheets of water cascading into a neighborhood. So these infrastructure improvements can give families real peace of mind and protect their greatest investments, their home. More than anything, though, we need to take a longer-term view of how we undertake flood protection. So, we will continue our work to modernize our flood hazard standards so all buildings and critical infrastructure in our state are built to withstand the test of time and the test of stronger and more potentially damaging storms. Quite simply, building to the flood standards of decades past makes absolutely zero sense in the wake of Ida and the storms from earlier last summer, which also inundated parts of our state. We all can see the impacts of climate change in our communities. That's true whether you live right here in the wonderful Lambertville or in another great community, Manville, which I toured with President Biden, or many other towns across our state where more powerful rain events have led to worse flooding, or even in a community like Mullica Hill where multiple homes were flattened last summer by a tornado in the same storm. Finally, before I turn things over to Sean, I would like to simply remind everyone of a simple mantra: where it rains, it can flood. The surest way to protect your home and your possessions from a flood is by purchasing a flood insurance policy. One thing I heard from many of the homeowners I met touring flood-ravaged communities last year and even before that was that they didn't buy a flood policy because they were told they didn't live in a so-called flood zone. To be clear, you do not need to live in a specified zone on a flood map to buy flood insurance. Every homeowner can purchase a policy. Your general homeowner's policy is not going to protect you from a flood. And FEMA's support, while critical to our response, and I can't thank them enough, will only help you meet your basic needs so you can begin to rebuild. Flood insurance is there to bring you back to where you were pre-flood, to bring you back whole. 2 nights ago, we got hit with some powerful rains throughout central Jersey. I know here in Lambertville, the downpour swelled both the Swan Creek behind us and the Alexacan Creek just up the Route 29, both of which did so much damage to this community in September, but thankfully stayed within levels not anywhere near dangerous this time. But the time will come, unfortunately, when another major deluge hits, whether it's here or elsewhere. I fear to say it's not a matter of if, it's a question of when. So let's do the hard work now to ensure that when that when comes, we're in a stronger position to protect our communities and homes and residents from those waters. Thank you again for always so graciously welcoming me, Mayor, and everybody here on council and the entire community. Lambertville has been extraordinary to me personally and to our administration. We love coming here. We love working with you. With that, please help me welcome an outstanding leader, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Sean Tourette.
So thank you for that, Governor Murphy. Thank you for your commitment to ensuring that we are protecting all New Jersey communities from flood risks. It is lovely to be here with you, Mayor, and former Mayor Fall, for your partnership in the aftermath of Ida. Thank you. New Jersey is ground zero for some of the worst impacts of climate change. That's just a simple reality. Ground zero. You know, the governor talked about being ahead, being planful, like any good government should. But what does that mean? It means reckoning with the fact that today, everything we build is based on a standard of rainfall that was developed in 1999. And that has to change, and soon. And we've been working across the Department of Environmental Protection, which may sound odd, but one of our greatest jobs, most important jobs, is to protect public safety, to protect people and communities from the risks of extreme weather and flooding. And the truth is that since 1999, depending on where you are in the state of New Jersey, our extreme precipitation has increased between 2 to 10%. And we're simply not ready. But Governor Murphy has set us on a path to be ready, to be more protective. And there, unfortunately, is not just one silver bullet that is going to protect any community from the ravages of climate change and extreme weather. But there is a network of solutions that together we can employ that will protect our communities, that will protect our local economies, our assets, both public and private. And it's what the governor laid out. Because in some places, the big civil works infrastructure projects, that can take decades to build, by the way. Some places, that's going to be the answer. In other places, buyouts of repeatedly flood-prone property, or that flood-prone property that has not yet flooded, but we know it will. In other areas, increasing our infrastructure's capacity to manage the water that we see. It's why Governor Murphy launched the Water Infrastructure Investment Plan that is going to help every community to fund those upgrades. And wise stormwater management planning. And the consideration of stormwater utilities, yes, decried by some as a rain tax. But Tropical Storm Ida, not even a hurricane when it hit New Jersey, really just a bad thunderstorm, took out large swaths of our communities. That is one hell of a rain tax. And together, by implementing this network of solutions, we can protect our communities and ensure thriving local economies and protect folks' investments. We're fortunate at the Department of Environmental Protection to host our state's Chief Climate Resilience Officer, Nick Angarone, who will oversee the expansion of our Blue Acres program. An efficiently run program where we're going to move closings quickly, thanks to the leadership of Deputy Commissioner Sean Moriarty, who oversees our legal apparatus. And we are going to do the thing that government always should: have your back. So thank you, Governor Murphy, for this investment and for pointing us always in the right direction.
You give me way too much credit, man. We wouldn't be where we are without you, trust me. And we wouldn't be where we are without the next speaker, because you heard me use the word federal on a number of occasions in terms of the funding associated with this. We have extraordinary legislative partners. We've got outstanding local leadership and county leadership. At the end of the day, we don't get to where we need to be without a big federal role. I first heard Tom Malinowski's name when I was the U.S. ambassador to Germany from John McCain, who was singing his praises as a guy who stood up for human rights in our State Department. He's been elected to Congress. He's been an extraordinary champion. And by the way, has an almost unique perspective into the awful, tragic war in Europe right now. And we wouldn't be here today with the federal dollars we're talking about without Tom Malinowski. So with that, please help me welcome your Congressman, Tom Malinowski.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming back to Lambertville. I feel like I want to start, before we come back to the purpose that we have gathered here for today, to address the issue that the Governor addressed at the top of his remarks. Given the news that came out yesterday about where the Supreme Court appears to be going in potentially overturning Roe versus Wade. And I will just say that the people that I represent across the 7th District, some are Democrats, some are Republicans, some are unaffiliated. We are all tired of the division and the conflict in this country and of having our lives upended again and again. The last thing that we need is for a radical Supreme Court to rip to shreds 50 years of settled law in this country that the overwhelming majority of Americans support. And I am delighted. I am delighted that our legislators and our governor earlier this year passed a bill in the state of New Jersey codifying the protections of Roe v. Wade. But I also want to issue a warning that our law is not necessarily safe. Yes, the Supreme Court decision will not overturn New Jersey's law, but the same people who have been pressing for the Supreme Court to do this are also at the same time pushing for the United States Congress, trying to elect a majority to the United States Congress that will enact a nationwide abortion ban. And if we allow them to do that, our law becomes moot. And that's the stake in this election in November that all of us have to remember. Are we going to preserve a majority in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, that will protect 50 years of settled law in this country, that will protect a woman's right to choose? So let's turn back to the reason why we're here. Nick, thank you so much for your words, for your perseverance these last few months. We are all going to work harder. We are going to redouble our efforts to help you and your family to make this transition easier. When the governor and I were here immediately after that catastrophe, I remember being struck not just by the scale of the devastation, but by the fact that these houses that were swept down the stream by that storm had obviously been here for generations. It was plain to all of us that this 500-year storm was something incredibly unique, something that hasn't happened in the living memory of anybody in the city of Lambertville. And yet we also know, as the governor stressed, that these 500-year storms are now happening every 5 or 10 years. We worked hard with the Biden administration to get that major disaster declaration, and my office has been working person by person, family by family, to try to get FEMA assistance. But that's not the solution. That's a Band-Aid, as the governor stressed. What we need in the medium term are real investments in the kind of flood control engineering that will protect families and communities from this kind of devastation in the future. And the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that we passed last year in Congress begins that effort. It is the biggest investment in American history in water infrastructure. In New Jersey, we think of the infrastructure bill, we think about the Gateway Tunnel and our roads and our bridges and all of that transportation-related infrastructure. But I think this is the most important part of the bill, the part of the bill that is going to affect the most lives in a positive way in the state of New Jersey. $17 billion just for the Army Corps of Engineers to do the flood control engineering that we need to protect ourselves, and billions of dollars more for stormwater management, wastewater, for resilience, up and down this state. There are big projects that we all know about, but every municipality has a small project that it needs to do. I've been talking to Mayor Novick, for example, about a project to deal with the hills, the trees up on this hill, some of which, as we saw a few months ago, tumbled down, threatening the houses all across this street. And we're talking to the federal agencies right now. We're looking for a way to deliver the resources that will help Lambertville do that. It's a small project, but our small municipalities can't afford even some of the smaller projects that are needed to keep our folks safe. So that's the infrastructure investment we need. But I said that was the medium-term solution. That's not enough, because Sean is right. This storm was a wake-up call for climate change. We all understand in New Jersey today, if we didn't before, climate change is not an abstraction. It's not something that you read about in a scientific paper or debate in the United Nations. Climate change is 4 feet of water in your basement. Climate change is a little stream, and I've got one in my backyard, that turns into the Mississippi River in a matter of hours, forcing you to evacuate and perhaps give up the home in which you've lived for generations. This is something very, very real. And it would be an absolute travesty if all we did was to invest billions of dollars building higher and higher and higher and higher flood walls without dealing with the thing that is causing these disasters to happen in the first place. And so my number one priority in Congress, having done the infrastructure bill to protect the people of New Jersey, and you're right, this is a public safety issue, is for once come together on a bipartisan basis around policy that will reverse catastrophic climate change. We've got a very simple choice. Thank you. We can either have this kind of devastation, or we can have a country that leads the world to clean energy. We can have suffering and homelessness, or we can create jobs and build the future. And that's another choice that the people of New Jersey and the people of the United States are going to have to make very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Tom, thank you. I was just asking Tom to make sure I have my facts correct. After all, facts do matter. So thank you for your strong words on why we're here today. But Tom just personally sponsored a bill in Congress that passed something like 408 to 10. There aren't many bills, Tom, am I right, that pass 408 to 10, which is to seize the Russian assets like the yachts and all their other crap, and to monetize that and put that money back into rebuilding Ukraine. That's what leadership is about. Last but not least, I mentioned it takes a village. It takes great county leadership, which we have, great legislative leadership, great leadership in Washington representing New Jersey, great leadership by guys like Sean Tourette. It also takes great local leadership. When you say to somebody who doesn't live in New Jersey, hey, we're one of the most exposed states, if not the most exposed states in America to climate change, they immediately go to the shore. They assume that that's where the tip of the spear is. And Sean will correct me if I'm wrong here. The tip of the spear is actually in two principal locations, and it's not the front end of the shore. It's the backwaters of the shore, and it's in communities like this, far inland, nowhere near the shore. This is where the teeth, the jaws, the terror and the damage of climate change takes hold. And you need great local leadership. I mentioned our friend, former Mayor Julia Fall. Julia, to you, to the council president and members of the council. But we got a terrific mayor here today, and he's going to lead us home. Andrew Noack, Mayor of Lambertville. Great to have you, man.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Enormous thanks to Governor Murphy, Congressman Malinowski, Commissioner Tourette, my old friends back there, Assemblywoman Reynolds-Jackson and Assemblyman Varelli. We're very glad to, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Director Lanza. Very happy to have you all here. It means a lot to have your support. Ida really was, as we've heard, a transformational event here in Lambertville. Our families here, the Angevines, Lee and Linda, as well as Nick and Stephanie, and many, many other dozens of families were greatly affected and still affected today. Many personal lives upended, still in disarray, still struggling. So for us to have partnerships at the state and the county and the federal level has just been, it's been very moving, quite honestly. To have FEMA 90%, the USDA grant to clean these creeks 75%. We're talking about millions of dollars in this community brought in by state and federal aid, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for those partnerships and for all of your hard work and your incredible leadership on both the state and federal levels. At the municipal level, we have a great responsibility to our people, to our way of life, to our traditions. I've just started 4 months ago, and I'm looking deep into the future, thinking about resiliency. I'm very glad that Lambertville has been chosen to be a part of the New Jersey Resilience Accelerator pilot, which is going to give us a lot of support. We've gone through many workshops already, and we've got an 8-hour one next week. This is going to provide us with the tools and the support and the encouragement that we need and that we must have if we're going to combat these storms and to prove ourselves resilient as individuals and as communities, because it's important for us to be resilient as individuals, and we know that now after Ida. I mean, it really was a remarkable event. Speaking for myself, I'm deeply committed to working at every possible level to move Lambertville forward into resiliency. I wholeheartedly am going to look at stormwater utilities. I'd love to do a feasibility study. Somebody's got to be first, and maybe it'll be Lambertville. I don't know. So we're going to take a look at that, because, you know, our steep slopes are steep, and a lot of water comes down them, and we saw what happened, and it's terrifying. But we are resilient, and our community has risen in the face of really a great tragedy. We cleaned the creeks out about 3 weeks ago. We removed 6,000 pounds of debris from our creeks. 80 people came out on a beautiful early Saturday in April. After the flood, we had hundreds and hundreds of people helping our neighbors. So it begins on the local level, but it's important for us to be working with all our partners, and for that we're very grateful. I appreciate all of you coming here today. Much gratitude, and I thank everybody here for coming and being a part of this. And you all know where I work, so if you have any ideas or you want to chip in, let me know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Andrew. Two last comments before, as they say in Hollywood, it's a wrap. Number one, this is a precious community. This is the quintessential New Jersey community, the quintessential, frankly, I think you could say, American community. And thank you for your leadership to all the electeds in this town, because it's a really, really special town. This is one of those towns that people know about all over the eastern seaboard and say, I got to someday get to Lambertville. And secondly, I know I say this on behalf of our administration, on behalf of the congressman, the county, our legislative. We always ask ourselves, is this a wedding or a marriage? In other words, are we going to go somewhere and spend a couple of hours, tie it up in a nice, neat bow, put it behind us, check the box, and move on? Or are we in this together for the long haul? And the long haul, as Tom and Sean said, is measured in decades as it relates to climate. There are some moves we can make right now. Blue Acres programs is probably the most immediate one, but some of this stuff is going to take a long time. And I just would say on behalf of all of us, we are in this for the long pull, and we will not relent. You have my word. So Nick, to you and Stephanie, thank you for letting us come back into where your former house stood. God bless you both. Good luck in your application process. If anybody needs this, I'll put a good word in with you, Dan Kelly and his team. If anybody needs a Blue Acres handout, help, it's these guys. Again, to Congressman Malinowski, cannot thank you enough. Commissioner Tourette, Mayor, thank you to all the elected officials, to everybody else here in Lambertville who always welcome us so graciously. Thank you all. Stay well. God bless.
Thank you.